Hello and welcome viewers, I am Pia and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. US President Donald Trump has stated that he may invoke the Insurrection Act to legitimize his deployment of National Guard troops to major American cities. US government shutdown continues for a 7th straight day as yet more bids to resolve the shutdown fail at the Senate. President Trump has stated that there will be layoffs if the shutdown is not solved soon. After a successful first day of negotiations in Egypt's Sharm el-Sheikh, Israel and Hamas representatives will sit with mediators for a second day of talks today. German Foreign Minister has stated that it is all up to Hamas now and has demanded that the first phase of Trump's plan be implemented this week. Swedish activist Greta Thunberg has arrived in Greece and has slammed Western governments, stating that they failed to do their part in securing aid for Gaza. US House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries has stated that there is radio silence from the White House as the government shutdown continues. Memorials and vigils have been organized in Israel and across the world, marking 2 years since the deadly October 7th terrorist attack that kicked off hostilities between Hamas and Israel. All right, viewers, those are the headlines and our top focus. In Russia's Nizhny Novgorod region, one civilian was injured after debris from intercepted drones fell to the ground. Now, according to the governor, air defenses repelled an attack involving around 20 drones targeting the industrial zone of Zerzinsk. The falling debris caused several small fires and minor damage to homes and a gas station, although officials confirmed no industrial sites were hit. Meanwhile, Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban has reiterated that Budapest will not support Ukraine's bid to join the European Union, stating that no country can blackmail its way into the EU bloc. With us on the broadcast is Mr. Glenn Grant, former advisor to the Ukrainian Defense Minister, joining us from Riga in Latvia. Thank you so much, sir, for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World. Fresh statements coming in from Viktor Orban. He has stated that he will not support Ukraine's bid to join the EU. He claims that no country can blackmail its way into the bloc. What do you make of these statements that have been put out?
Well, we all know by now that Orban is working for Russia. I mean, he's an oligarch. He's rich. He's playing power games. And frankly, it's disgusting for a country that was actually invaded by Russia. Hungary seems to have forgotten its history, and there's no blackmail. I don't see any blackmail from anybody. I mean, Ukraine is fighting for its survival, and it wants help. And joining the EU would help it, bringing in a whole raft of new ways of working and ideas, and they need it badly. So Orban is just being, frankly, a nasty piece of work.
Indeed. And, what do you make of the recent statements coming in from Andrej Babis, who's recently won the Czech parliamentary elections? He's also claimed that Ukraine is not ready to join the European Union. And he's further stated that supplying Ukraine with ammunition should be NATO's responsibility.
I think, I mean, this is another pro-Russian politician. I think what we need to look at is the wider subject, which is that basically every Western country and US, especially US, has been infiltrated by Russians and Russian money over the last, let's say, 100 years. And probably almost every country in the world has been infiltrated and people have been bought. And what we're now seeing is that this is part of the Russian game of pushing as many of their people into power in countries as possible. And all of that goes against Ukraine, because every time you get another one, like the new Czech Prime Minister, they do their absolute best to reduce the ability of Ukraine to survive against Russia.
All right, so I request you to stay on with us. We're tracking some other very crucial developments. In Washington, US President Donald Trump has stated that he is sort of made a decision on whether to supply Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine or not. Now, speaking at the Oval Office, Trump has stated that he wants clarity on how the weapons would be used, calling the Russia-Ukraine war a conflict that should never have started in the first place. Now, his comments come after Russian President Vladimir Putin warned that any US move to send these long-range missiles would destroy relations with Moscow. Listen in to what Trump has to say.
Yeah, I've sort of made a decision, pretty much, if you consider. Yeah, I think I want to find out what they're doing with them.
Yes.
You know, where are they sending them, I guess. I'd have to ask that question. That war should never have started, would have never started. Such bad judgment was used there. I think on both sides, by the way. But nobody looks good with the war with Russia and Ukraine. Nobody. It's been a horrible. This week they lost over 7,000 soldiers between the two of them. This is every week they're losing 7,000, 8,000, 5,000.
Still with us on the broadcast is Mr. Glenn Grant. We've just heard what Donald Trump has had to say. He said that he's sort of made a decision on whether to supply Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. How do you infer this statement?
Well, I infer exactly the same as he's been doing for the last couple of years, 3 years, which is delay, which is a typical Russian FSB playbook game of talk loud and then actually not do anything. And that is exactly what he's doing. He knows it full well where these missiles will be used. And he doesn't need to ask anything else. But this is a game. And it's about time the truth actually came out with these things, that this man is actually working on behalf of Russia. He supports Putin. He doesn't support Zelensky. And he does everything to down Zelensky and to not support Ukraine properly in the way that a Western country should do. I don't think he realizes what he's losing by this, but America is losing by not supporting Ukraine.
And do you think then the recent comments made by Putin warning the United States that sending the Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine would destroy relations, do you think Putin is emboldened by the fact that Trump is delaying and he's just buying time with his statements?
Oh, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, he knows that Trump's his man, and he knows that Trump is going to delay. And Putin will use anything to let's say scare the populations of the West, we all know he's lying. We all know that it's not going to make a blind bit of difference to what Russia does, because he hasn't actually got any capacity, but he's got words, and he uses those words extremely skillfully and powerfully, and unfortunately, a lot of people believe him.
Indeed, and what's interesting is that we're also seeing some of the countries, some NATO countries such as France now take action against Russia's shadow fleet. Could we then expect other countries to follow suit and sort of pressurize Russia in the Baltic Sea?
That's a very good question. And I think one of the problems is all the countries around the Baltic Sea are very pro-NATO and I'm wanting to listen to what NATO says and does before they act individually, with probably the exception of Finland and Estonia. But even they are, in a way, duty-bound to follow the NATO line. We've heard talk about this. I mean, for the last 6 months, we've heard talk that we could close off the Baltic Sea and stop the Russian fleet going in and out. But basically nothing has happened. I don't see anything happening in the near future. France only stopped one ship and it's been stopped before. So we're not actually seeing anything of any value. I'm sorry, but this is the weak West being weak against a strong Russia.
All right, so with that, I would like to thank you for taking out time, sharing your perspective with us on NewsX World. With that, viewers, we're shifting our focus away from Europe towards the Middle East, particularly Israel. Now, Israelis have paid their respects at a memorial for the victims of the 7th October 2023 Hamas terrorist attack at the Nova Music Festival, which killed more than 370 people and left dozens hostage. Residents of Kibbutz Kfar Aza near the Gaza border have also marked the second anniversary of the deadly terrorist attack as Hamas and Israeli negotiators continue indirect talks to end the two-year war in Gaza under a US proposed peace plan. Meanwhile, in Australia, parliamentarians from both the government and opposition marked the anniversary of this heinous terrorist attack, expressing solidarity with hostages and victims' families. In fact, Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese stated that their government stands with Jewish communities worldwide against anti-Semitism. Let's listen in to what Australia's opposition leader Susan Ley has said.
To those seeking to protest, heed this simple message: stop. Seeking to use October 7 to advance your political agenda is abhorrent and un-Australian. Today cannot be only about words. As we mark October 7, we must recommit ourselves to taking action to stamp out anti-Semitism and to affirm our support for the existence of Israel, the world's only.
Australian Jewish groups have condemned a pro-Palestinian rally planned at the Sydney Opera House for the 12th of October, warning that it could incite hatred and call for the destruction of Israel. In fact, similar messages supporting Hamas were reported on billboards and walls in Melbourne, prompting police investigations. Now, the anniversary of the terrorist attack has also highlighted surging anti-Semitic and Islamophobic incidents in Australia since the war began earlier itself. With us on the broadcast is Mr. Matty Zweig, geopolitical expert, joining us from Tel Aviv. So it's been 2 years since that terrible terrorist attack had taken place, targeting a music festival, targeting the elderly, young children who were then taken hostages. And now talks are taking place in Egypt. What is, in fact, the mood like on the ground? It must be very somber today, marking the 2-year anniversary of this tragedy.
Well, good morning. And yes, indeed, it's a very somber day. It's a very painful day because Israel has been in his existence of almost 78 years, witnessed many cases of pain, many wars, many wounded, but they usually, in most of the cases, except of course in terror actions that have been occurring in the territory, in most of the cases they were against the army. And there were soldiers involved with all the pain. There was part of a war. In this case, there was the worst pogrom made against the Jewish people since the Holocaust. It was, people cannot understand what did this to the country. This is before and an after. Usually in Israel, it was usually divided between political ideas or what is wrong and what is not wrong, and what to do with the enemies. And today, public opinion has shifted about a very, very negative opinion of the Palestinian cause, because they understand that there is a big part of this coast that is jihadistical, genocidal, is not talking about a Palestinian state, is not talking about a future of good neighborhood between two countries as it was voted by the United Nations in 1947 and implemented in 1948 only from the Israeli side and never, never from the Palestinian side. And this is to add to all the pain that is today. If we count all the people murdered in Nova, in the kibbutzim, in the Moshav, in all the villages around Gaza, that until that moment, they were open to Gazans. Gazans coming fluently every day to work. And now we know that they came to work, and many of them, they just passed information and how to attack and to murder terribly the people that they were hosting them and paying them for their work. I mean, this is a terrible betrayal that is going to last for maybe 100 years, if everything is okay. And we are trying now to reach a point that we can not do in peace, because it's not going to be peace unless Hamas is going to be erased completely, militarily, from the ground, and give also the Palestinians a chance to live in peace with their neighbors. It means with us, because also the Palestinians have been kidnapped by this genocidal jihadist terrorist movement, and not only our country, and not only our last 48 hostages. They are still rotting in their caves and in their tunnels, and they are still holding them to keep a grip on the power that they already have not. And I know that all the world is very angry, and they confuse war with genocide. They confuse the right to self-determination and defending yourself with the right of terrorists to attack civilians. People is confused, and this situation in the last 2 years has uncovered not how many anti-Israel are in the world, but also how many anti-Semites are in the world, because they are attacking also innocent people in the local Jewish communities around the world, which means that you are not anti-Israel, you are anti-Semite for all these people that has been doing this terrible thing like attacking synagogues, attacking civilians. And this is what the Australians were talking about, and good that there is a group of parliamentarians that they do this, because they are less and less in the world that they are doing this, even in our allies in Europe and sometimes in the United States. I mean, this is crazy. This is 1,997 people that has been murdered since the beginning of all these hostilities. And now we are trying to reach a point that we can do a ceasefire and start reconstructing and having also, from a psychological point of view, everybody must rest. Nobody wants to harm civilians, Palestinians, but Israel is trying to free their hostage, to dismantle this terrorist organization, and many, many people is supporting them, confusing completely the aims of this conflict.
Sir, you've pointed out that we've recently seen a rise in anti-Semitism. We recently seen the tragic terrorist attack in Manchester. Before that, we've seen similar such attacks in Boulder, in Colorado, in Los Angeles, in Washington, D.C. as well, where Jews have specifically been targeted. Now, in your assessment, to what extent does online discourse, especially anti-Semitic rhetoric online, what role does it play in fueling anti-Jewish hatred that manifests in such terrorist attacks?
Anti-Jewish sentiments have been spread over the Western world first, and now in all the countries. You know, it's very hard to explain. As a Jewish, liberal, democratic person that I am, and all the people I know, and millions of people that they are the same in the Jewish people around the world, it's very, very hard to understand. But we have always understood there is always a need for a scapegoat, because every time that look what is going on in some countries, like in Spain, they are rotten to the core with their political establishment being accused of a lot of corruption, and to move the public opinion from this, they are 24 hours a day talking about Gaza, talking about Israel, trying to blame Jews for all kinds of things. I mean, for Jews, it's like coming back to the Inquisition times. And people don't understand that. You are not talking against Gaza because clearly you have very, very bigger problems in quantity and in importance in the world, like millions dying in Sudan, in Congo, the repressions of the Chinese, of the Muslims in China. I mean, nobody talk about anything because they are all forgotten countries or very big countries that nobody want to touch them. It has been, okay, people say more than 60,000 dead in Gaza. This is terrible, but nobody says that most of these people, maybe 60% at least, they are terrorists that were attacking Israel and not Israel attacking them in 7th of October. The people don't talk now like they want to forget that there are 1 million dead between Russia and Ukraine, and you don't see a flotilla of peace activists sailing to the Odessa port to support Ukraine. Nobody's going to do that because they fear they are going to be sunk. Israel doesn't sink these sails at their cost. They took their ships, they put them on a plane back to their countries, even with all the pain of people that they are trying to demonize Israel and to make them the bad guy for all the problems in the world. We are living crazy time, not only for the Jewish people, not only for the Israelis. We are living crazy times because everything is completely against our core values of not only the Western world. I mean, the main values of not lying and not twisting and not biasing the minimal truths, because if the Palestinians deserve a country, let's talk about it. Let's make a dialogue of peace. Let's make a dialogue of peace if the Catalans in Catalonia, they deserve a country, or the Basques, or Scotland, but nobody is doing that. They are avoiding everything, and the big Satan of the world, for anti-Semites and for anti-Israel and for all the people that want to avoid their own failures and their own corruptions in their governments, are pointed now to Israel. Israel has a lot of things to change. At least 60 to 65% of the population in all surveys in the last 1.5 years at least, they are against this government. They want to change it, but they will change it as they usually change it in the last 77 years, in elections, in democratic elections. Israel is the only democratic country in the Middle East, a liberal democracy, and the world choose to attack Israel. Shame, shame on all those people. And Israel is not perfect, as I said. They have to change things. And now they did the first step to accept the Trump plan with 20 points that at least 13 of them are not very nice to Israel ears. They would like it different to assure that in the next 100 years, it would not be a terrorist movement in Gaza Strip or anywhere that is going to attack Israel like they terribly did the 7th of October, not only attacking people, not only murdering them, but enjoying the murder. They film on cameras everything, how they rape women, how they burn babies even in microwaves. They did such terrible things that we didn't listen about them since the Holocaust. And people is applauding this movement. This is completely, the world is upside down. Something must change.
All right, so I request you to stay on with us. We're tracking further news, this time from Syria. Syria has announced parliamentary election results for the indirect vote that had taken place, a key step in the shift away from ousted leader Bashar al-Assad's regime, but one that has sparked concerns about inclusivity and fairness under the country's new leaders. Yesterday's vote saw around 6,000 members of regional electoral colleges choose candidates from pre-approved lists, part of a process to produce nearly two-thirds of the new 210-seat body. Syrian interim President Ahmed al-Shara will later select the remaining one-third. Now, in the days preceding the vote, analysts and some Syrians had voiced concerns that it was too centrally managed and that suspending elections in areas outside government control meant not all communities were being fairly represented. In fact, 6 new lawmakers are women, according to election observers, who also say that 4 of those elected were from religious minorities, including a Christian, an Ismaili Muslim, and 2 Alawites, the sect from which Assad hails. Now, another 6 are from ethnic minorities, 3 Turkmen, 3 Kurds, and 1 of whom is a woman. Now, the authorities say they resorted to an indirect system rather than universal suffrage due to a lack of reliable population data following the civil war, which killed hundreds of thousands of Syrians and displaced millions. Now, citing security and political reasons, authorities postponed the vote in areas outside government control, including Kurdish-held parts of Syria's north and northeast, as well as the province of Sweda, held by the Druze minority. Those suspensions leave 21 seats empty, and it remains unclear when votes could be held there. Listen in to what Nawar Najma, spokesperson for the Higher Committee for the Elections of the People's Assembly, has said about this delay.
يعني الوقت المتوقع لإجراء الانتخابات في محافظات الرقة والحسكة هو ذاته الوقت المتوقع لتنفيذ اتفاق 10 آذار، وبالتالي نحن باعتبار ليس لدينا وقت متوقع حتى الآن بسبب تعطيل تنفيذ اتفاق 10 آذار، وبالتالي نحن لا نستطيع أن نحدد جداول زمنية للرقة والحسكة، وأعتقد أن مسألة السويداء أيضا ترتبط بهذه الأمور، إلا أن يعني المنحى إيجابي ونحن جادين بأن يكون هناك انتخابات تكميلية لاستكمال كل أعضاء مجلس الشعب على كل.
Still with us on the broadcast is Mr. Matt Easway, a geopolitical expert. So there are a lot of experts that are pointing out that although there's been no direct popular vote, this is a cautious step in political transition towards democratization in the long run. Would you agree with what they infer from this process?
I don't know if I had to agree or not to agree, because we must not forget that even dictators or processes of terrorist states that they were changing hands in any way, they want to have legitimation by elections. And that's what is being here. I mean, you have a central government that is not really established, is not really, is fragile, is not hard, is not governing in all the previous borders that Syria had until 2011, and they also have been fighting between themselves and the minorities, that they are not such little minorities. We are talking about the Druze, the Kurds, the Christians, the Alawites, to mention the 4 biggest ones. And after these elections, the representation is minimalistic. And some of them, I mean, they had anyway not to do all the parliament, but about 55% of the seats, and the rest is going to be appointed by Al-Julani, by the president. Anyway, this is going to give to the people in the world that want to say that this is a real transition to democratic country, a better country than in the times of Hafez al-Assad. And it's not really in that point. I mean, because most of the representation now is going to be Sunni, which are the factions of Al-Julani, and males. I mean, there are no enough representation for women. There are only 2 seats given to Christians and to Alawites. I mean, this is going to be a kind of symbolic gesture from the central government that they are not coping with the real problems of integrating the minorities. I mean, in all the area of Soweida and the Druze area, I mean, they are not going to have participation And I must tell you something about the Druze. After what happened, after what the central government tried to do to them and also kill a lot of them, they understood that they are also coping with a jihadist group that doesn't change their skin. They are basically supremacists. They are trying to get over all the political system. And now they are acting as an independent area, which is mainly having contacts with Israel that is really helping them, even with medicines and food, and of course security means, because they see that the central government is against them. So if the central government is not going to understand that they have to do a kind of a federation, or they have to give a real representation in the parliament to all minorities, nothing good is going to be in the future, and things are going to be confrontational, and here and there are going to be violence spreading, and these elections are not going to be something good for the future of Syria. If the central government is going to understand that they must, now that they have held the elections, to start a dialogue to real integrations of all the minorities, then things will change. In this moment, it's just more of the same after an election.
All right, sir. With that, I would like to thank you for taking our time, sharing your perspective with us on NewsX World. With that, viewers, we're shifting our focus towards France. French President Emmanuel Macron has tasked his outgoing Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu, who had resigned earlier, to hold last-ditch talks with other political parties to try to chart a path out of the current crisis. Lecornu had tendered his government's resignation only hours after announcing his cabinet lineup, making it the shortest-lived administration in modern French history and deepening the country's political crisis. It was not immediately clear as to what Lecornu's task would entail. France's constitution allows Macron to reappoint Lecornu as Prime Minister. Macron has given him 48 hours to tell him that he will be holding meetings with political parties. Meanwhile, Gabriel Attal, former Prime Minister of France, has reacted to the situation. Listen into what he had to say.
On vit des heures graves. Comme beaucoup de Français, je ne comprends plus les décisions du président de la République. Il y a eu la dissolution et il y a depuis des décisions qui donnent le sentiment d'une forme d'acharnement à vouloir garder la main. Encore une fois, ce qu'il faut, c'est accepter de changer la méthode et pas donner le sentiment qu'on veut garder la main sur tout. J'étais le premier à dire, en 2024, après la dissolution, que je considérais qu'il ne fallait pas que le Premier ministre vienne de notre parti politique, du parti politique créé par le président de la République.
Shifting focus to more developments we're tracking, one hiker was reportedly killed and lost their lives, even as 100 others remain stranded on the planet's highest mountain, Mount Everest. After massive snowfall on the slopes of Everest, over 200 tourists and hikers were caught stranded above the 5,000-meter mark on the peak. Images published by the Tibet Fire Department show rescuers evacuating hikers after sudden heavy snowfall on the Tibetan Plateau and near Mount Everest on the Chinese side. Hundreds of people have already been rescued from the slopes of Everest. Listen in to what one of the rescued hiker has had to say about the experience.
我确实没有经历过这么困难的，而且，如果你徒步到后面的话，鞋子进水湿了，然后你停下来之后，就你停久的话，你就发现就是会身体，你可能就会降温什么的。那你还在走的话，你可能还没什么感觉。所以昨天的话，就是哪怕累了，基本上不会让自己完全停下来，就确实。 昨天大概可能走了18、19公里吧，而且就是基本上是在大雪中走的。然后还好，就是昨天前面有一些人在开路，然后我们可以跟着脚印去走，相对容易一点。不然的话，就是确实按照个人的力量是没办法走出来的。
All right, viewers, with that, it's a wrap on this bulletin. More news and updates on the other side. Stay tuned on NewsX World.